Welcome to the Thursday, August 26th, 2021 meeting of the Cincinnati Public Schools Board of Education Policy and Equity Committee meeting. Notably, the first committee meeting or any meeting of this body that has invited the public. So welcome everybody for being here and thank you for joining us. We will go around, folks introduce themselves so the public can know who they're looking at. We'll start right here.
Thanks, President, General Counsel, Secretary.
Stephanie Scott, Assistant General Counsel for the district.
Dan Hoying, General Counsel.
Hi, Ben Lindy, Board Member.
Mike Morosky, Board Member and Committee Chair.
Steve Bolton, Board Member.
Phyllis Davis, the Board's Administrative Assistant.
And we have some folks in the back as well, so welcome later and introducing themselves when they come up. So you can all see them out in the virtual land. It looks like we have some attendees, so that's great. So we have a media agenda. We are going to try to keep it to a couple hours. So as folks plan their comments, we'll just request that they be succinct. That includes me. If you are watching virtually in the next 5 minutes, you have the opportunity to sign up to speak. You please do so by raising your hand. You'll be recognized. Please say which school you're affiliated with if you are, your relationship to the district. And if you would like a response to a specific question, please include the best contact information for you. If you are here in person, welcome. And in an effort to be equitable with the folks watching virtually, we would ask that people who are here in person that would like to speak just go over to Rob and let him know. Rob's right there. Normally in a committee meeting, it's kind of a back and forth, conversational, but again, with half of the folks watching, folks here, we want to try to be equitable about that. So we are going to dive right in our agenda. We have a number of media friends here. Thank you for being here. I assume you're here for the selection of principles item on the agenda. Okay. So the first item is, I know it is. I know, that's why they're here, man. That's why I said it. So the review of bylaws is first on the agenda, and this was something that we had started working on a little bit in June and then took July off. And it came out of the committee of the whole. So is there any update to that?
Yeah, so we at the last meeting we had 2 assignments. As you said, this came from updating the definition of the committee of the whole description. So that's been described, and then at the last board member meeting, or the last policy meeting, we were also asked to update responsibilities of the full board and asked to look at the OSBA definition. So we've added a paragraph to that. A few more pages back beyond that, indicated with the board.
So I've had an opportunity, thank you, Mr. Horning. I've had an opportunity to look at this. I do not have any questions. I'm sure Ms. Bolton does, but she had to step out. So, Mr. Lindy, do you have any questions about the revised bylaws, including new descriptions for a committee of the whole OSBA?
I do not.
Well, I'm going to wait. We'll move on to the agenda, but we'll wait before we recommend. There she is.
I'm sorry, I gave
All good, Ms. Bolton. Family first, always.
Yep.
So we are on the first agenda item, the review of the bylaws, and there were the 2 sections, the description of committee of the whole and some OSB language later on. Neither Mr. Lindy or I had any questions, wondering if you did, and if so.
I'm glad we got the Cal language.
Yes.
I think Cal language is fine, and appreciate it. I would just ask that General Counsel review the roles or responsibilities of the board. That's a very limited list. And it used to be longer, and I know in ORC it is longer. It's nothing crucial, it's not time sensitive or anything, but I think that was sort of the draft from what we cut and pasted as we changed committee assignments or committee roles. So if you could just review that so that there's a little bit more weight as to what the board's supposed to be. Thank you.
Would we want to do that and then have it on the agenda in September and then pass it back to the full board once it's all done instead of doing this piecemeal thing with committee of the whole?
That works for general counsel.
Yes, that's council. Great. All right, number 1 down. Number 2, our fearless internal auditor who is here. Hello. Would you like to come up since we're going to be talking about you?
Has to.
And then you get to introduce yourself to people in TV land.
Fantastic. Good morning, everyone. Wonderful to see you. Welcome to our folks at home. My name is Lauren Roberts, and I'm the Director of Internal. And I think, Mr. Boyne, did you want to kick off the conversation today, or would you like me to?
Up to you. We were asked, I think this is an assignment from the audit/finance committee to update the internal audit charter to propose a new title for the internal auditor, the chief audit executive, and then also there's some changes to the description of essentially her job term on the last 2 paragraphs.
Absolutely.
That's
a great summation. Ms. Bolton may be able to speak to this as well. We had some great conversation that initially started at our June audit committee meeting regarding the independence of internal audit function as well as the position. And it was the intention, I think, of the committees as well as Treasurer Wagner to help elevate that position to ensure folks internally and externally recognize that the position in the department is independent and directly reports to the Board of Education. So I think these proposals support that initiative, and I hope I'm here to answer questions, and I hope that it is able to move forward.
Great. Committee members have any questions?
We are one of the few districts that actually has an internal auditor. We have for a number of years, and this recommendation came from our community audit committee, which is housed, if you will, and as only community members plus the finance committee. And it was the recognition of how important the internal auditor's independence is. Mm-hmm. And so we have a great internal auditor, a great internal office, auditor staff, and this is something the treasurer's in favor of, the audit committee and the finance committee. And Mr. Coyne has put the language together to change the policy.
Well, if there's nothing else to add, I would just like to, my 2 cents. Ms. Roberts, you and I don't get to spend a ton of time together. I'm not on finance or audit, but for whatever it's worth, I'm always duly impressed every single time you come up or the documents come up in full board meetings. For the public's edification, we received a number of financial awards. The Treasurer's Office certainly is a part of that, but you're an enormous part of that. So I'm excited to call you the Chief Audit Executive from now on.
Thank you.
Chief Roberts, and at the elevated status of DLT represented by Cassidy. So thank you for what you do.
Thank you. I sincerely appreciate that.
Yep.
Thank you very much for your time today.
No problem. Thank you. All right. So we will pass this on to the full board for approval at our next meeting. And our next meeting, so September 1st is CAL. Yes?
Mm-hmm. This is the 13th.
13th. Gotcha. September 13th, we will vote to approve that. Excellent. Keep it moving. We're doing a great job. Creating a position, 3111 and 4111.
So we're joined today also by Susan Bunty and Ross Dupeau from the talent department. We've gone backwards on this policy. Last meeting, we proposed some language. I think there was unanimity that the first paragraph relating to only that was, I think, uniformly thought not really appropriate in this creating a position policy, sort of antiquated. So that's been removed. The language we proposed last time in terms of proposing the position in the superintendent's report, I think was not well received by the committee. So this is the original language, and Ross and Susan and I welcome your comments. We will write this up however you like. Board members?
Thank you. I was particularly concerned that in the policy, as we work through it, that something that was struck, which was based upon the recommendation of the superintendent, the board shall reserves the right to. And I think Chairman Morosky mentioned that we should not be restricted from suggesting our own ideas about what this have. So certainly that strike about the board reserving needs to be put back in as language, whatever we're proposing.
Great.
You say that it looked like it does have the board reserves the right to.
Well, it depends which version we're looking at.
I was looking at
And I just think that it's been struck on one of the renditions.
The board reserves the right to, yeah, I did not intend that to be.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right. And so we keep it, and we also then deal with, I'm not sure that this ABCD list that appears
Yeah.
is very strong or meaningful. It just looks soft. And there should be a better criteria to determine, or no criteria at all. It's the special needs of students, the number of students, the special needs of the community, operational services. If there's a criteria to create a position, there should be a stronger criteria.
Yeah, or none. I agree with, I mean,
Yeah.
just leave it sort of, board reserves the right to do these things, hard stop. Because, I mean, really, that list could go on forever. Sure. I mean, I think that's the kind of thing, right? It could be infinite or gone. I don't know. I kind of lean toward gone, honestly. You, Mr. Lindy, do you have a strong preference one of that?
This is not something I was trying to reference.
Not something. Okay, so let's scrap it. Okay. Do we scrap it? Are we ready to put this on September 13th, or do we want to go back? They could add anything.
Just the language that they put in, I mean, that strong superintendent shall be responsible. I mean, that is their responsibility to recommend. I mean, I don't see anything that's adverse except that national thing.
This is all, yeah, you're looking at this one.
Mhm.
Yeah, it'd be just that.
Yes, that's great.
Okay. So is this committee fine with moving this forward?
Yep.
Ben says
I
yes.
think it's great.
Eve says it's great.
I know.
Fantastic.
Less and more.
Good. All right, September 13th, we'll give people to vote on. 3112 and 4112. This is an exciting one. Board employee communications. So as a reminder to folks, this came up, I don't think it's probably a secret to anybody. There's been a number of folks communicating with the Board of Education this past year and a half plus for a myriad amount of reasons. And this committee uncovered an antiquated, I think at best, policy. Yeah, we'll go back to it. I'm too far down the line right now. I got a good thing going. Gotta go now. Derailed, man. Put in its performance report. Policy 4123 regarding Ben Lindy. Anyway, so there was a number of folks communicating with the Board of Education. This board uncovered an antiquated policy, in my opinion, that sort of dictated how employees communicate with the board, by which they had to go through, like, the superintendent to get to a board member. Now, whether or not, I don't know that ever happened, to be blunt. And so we decided we should probably look at it. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Boying for this one and kind of see where we're at.
So this is that policy. This is what's in your board packet tonight is what's currently in board policy. I think we agree that it's antiquated. In terms of proposals, at the last meeting we had suggested some language, and it was not, I think, all that well received by the committee. Again, Susan, Ross, Stephanie, we would like to get a sense of what the board's preference is. What are the key sort of principles that the board would like to see reflected in this policy? And I'm not sure we had that kind of a discussion at the last meeting.
You're right. We didn't.
This is just a question.
Yeah.
Because I'm not coming in with a strong prior that it should be one way or should be. There are two things that feel true here to me. Both are true, and they feel like they could be in tension with each other. I don't know how to resolve it. First thing that's true is I think in any organization, it is unusual and out of protocol for someone to skip a whole bunch of levels in their community. That's been true in any company or organization I've ever worked for. It feels appropriate to have something about that on the one hand. On the other hand, if somebody is a voter and a taxpayer, like in our school district, and they want to lobby their board of education because of things they believe in, that feels like an important First Amendment thing, and everybody should be able to do that. And those two things both feel true, and so what I can't figure out is like what's the appropriate way. But if we could find a way to do that, I would be very excited to support it. Dan has a solution.
That is the challenge. I think that is the challenge.
I think we have to define roles with them. Depends which role you are playing. And certainly as an employee, you do have a role that does limit you in certain ways. And also there are procedures and protocols regarding maintaining the hierarchy of authority. But to our role, we're also obligated to find out whatever we can find out, whatever way we can find it out in order to serve the public. And sometimes that means you have to talk to folks that are within the institution or the organization, or they feel compelled to talk to us. So I think there's a definition of role. There's probably different rules for the role that you are in. I think there should also be an obligation here to even just to cite the whistleblower policy, because we also say that it's the responsibility of an employee to tell people if something is not right, if there's corruption or if there's inefficiency. I mean, they're obligated to do that as employees. So roles and then the whistleblower, and board members have to have more. How about this? I think you could limit what we are able to do board to employee. But more so than the employee to board. We have those several that we actually, so it's which pathway as well as role and whistleblower. The superintendent has to be able to run the district, but the superintendent also reports to the governing body, which is the board. So the superintendent can't keep things from us. We have to be fully informed. And we have to inform her and him or whoever it's going to be. But
any other comments from committee members? So I will, I want to highlight something you've said that I agree with. I think there's something to the, us to employees, I think is easier to do than the other way around for the concern, for the reasons Ben brought up. I also think, and we have the president of the teachers union here, so hopefully Julia give some feedback when you speak it. I know you signed up to speak, so I think that would be germane to this as well, because I know there are policies there, that I think are related. The only thing I would add is that if the goal of letter A, and I guess really B, C seems fine to me, quite frankly. I don't even know that needs to be touched. That seems pretty legit. But if the goal actually of this policy was to, quote, effectively manage communications, going through the superintendent's the worst. It's like the worst, I think maybe the worst way to do it. So if that is part of the goal, I don't know if that is part of the goal, there's probably a better way to do it. If it's through Phyllis, if it's through another channel. But I know, I'll just say for me, having done this now going on 4 years, it is extremely helpful for me to hear from folks that are impacted by our decisions. And people are going to reach out, because there's about a million ways you can reach out to us now. Probably didn't exist when we started. probably didn't have Facebook Messenger or Twitter direct message or Snapchat or whatever. So I think that's probably going to be hard to really nail down. So the only thing I would add, and then I'll be quiet, and then we can bring this up and talk about it again next, is if that is the goal, there's probably a better way to do it.
That's very helpful. I appreciate your comment.
Cool.
Yeah.
Great. And now back to Mr. Lindy, selection of principals. I did totally skip that. Selection of principals, to Mr. Lindy's point, is extremely important policy, and Mr. Lindy is always reminding us of the importance of having a strong academic leader on the principal position. So we are going to turn it over to General Counsel and see where we're at with this.
Yeah, so the policy's been updated. We added the paragraph about the screening process that now takes place to develop a pool of principal candidates. We were asked, I think, to change some language in here about when the superintendent makes a selection, it's not notifying the board. I think it was asked to change that to inform the board, inform the LSTMC. The last piece about redesigned schools, that's not a concept that we're still using. Been updated with the current evaluation of administrators policy that we put in place with the OPED system. So I believe all the updates to this policy have been made. Welcome your questions, or otherwise ready.
Committee members?
All right.
I just want to know if we have included the evaluation document that we have said should be used, or in keeping with Ohio
Okay.
laws. OPES.
Yeah, we have, it references in paragraph 5.
Right.
And then we've separately on 1530 updated, be consistent with the latest OPED. Susan Monty shaking. We made those changes, I think, earlier this year, actually.
And that would be great, and maybe it could be here a little bit more obvious. Even if it's like what it's really called, the OPES thing, the Ohio Principal Evaluation.
It's on there.
It's there, but I even putting OPES would be
Okay.
something as simple as that.
Yep.
One of the few policy people read.
So everyone knows OPES is Ohio Principal Evaluation.
I was going to ask if we could hear from Susan or Ross just about what they like about this. Is this everything they're looking for? Is there anything you think are the most important change?
Come on up.
Great to be here, right, Ross? Or Rob?
Hello, Ron.
How you doing, sir?
Good. No, I think after this one, covering the LSDMC, covering the evaluation and the process and the recommendation process. So I think it captures everything we need.
Thank you.
Stay there, Ross. We have one more.
All right. So are we good with this then? We're good?
Right now.
Good. Pass it on.
Yeah.
Number 13.
All right, moving forward.
Cool. The next one, district organization, policy 1100.
This was added to the agenda. It's another HR policy. I'm not sure whether there are any changes proposed to this. This is the policy as it currently exists. We've reviewed it. I think it's accurate and applied with. Glad to answer any questions, and Ross is here as well.
My colleagues to go first, as always.
Thank you. I have, I didn't fully appreciate whether or not this is clear enough, or it is clear and it's not necessarily been practiced, but mostly school boards are supposed to adopt organizational charts. At least that's my understanding. And there's some reference here. It's supposed to reflect the board's vision and mission to ensure clear lines of authority and responsibility to define each position. So is it the superintendent's chief executive? The board will approve the broad purpose and function of the position in harmony with state law in each case. I mean, I just really know that in other districts there actually is an organizational chart. I don't really believe we have one fully developed or have not for a number of years, but that it's supposed to be, even within our protocol of administration, in the 1000s, I think we are obligated to insist that the organizational chart reflect our vision mission. But then I think it's supposed to be presented for vote, at least procedurally, other places. I'm not sure about that, but that might be old school.
So I'll just respond. I'm not sure about being presented for a vote. If that's what I'd like to do, I'm sure obviously you have the ability to do that. I do think we have an organizational chart prepared. We have routinely had kind of this high-level chart that used to go on the website, but there has been some effort over the summer to fill that out all the way down at this point. So I'm not sure. I think we need probably, it was reviewed at the last PLT meeting. Some additional changes being made. Some departments have gone farther down than others, but it's prepared in a way that could be.
Because even according to policy, this is supposed to be done at the operational level.
This is deep.
And it should be deep.
Yeah.
It's almost never been deep, at least for many, many years. I think, too, it's important in a superintendent search that there actually is one that exists. But I also think that in that preparation for that search, we have to recognize that probably under the current circumstances, it's whatever organizational chart we see should be more of a draft, because it would be inappropriate for making huge things during the interim piece. But it's great that it's been developed. I think in part because we insisted on it. So I just kind of look into that about the board's role.
Yep. Is there you have any suggestion in terms of how this would be presented to the board? Whether it's something you want a presentation on, you want it at policy committee, do you have any preference on that?
I think we probably need to see it as board members. I think it probably goes to policy. It doesn't go to finance, doesn't go to student achievement. So it would come back to policy in its entirety, and it probably would have to be draft. And then, don't you think, Mr. Chair, then we can react to that?
I think so. I think that makes sense.
So currently it's organized by senior leaders, and then the directors in those departments, as Dan indicated, it's a comprehensive look at each of the departments that contains every individual within that department. So we have that, so we could bring it to the policy meeting.
Good night. I think it's important too, since there has been so much change in transition, because I know, we've gotten updates about people getting more responsibilities, maybe people getting less responsibilities, maybe people moving around. And so right now, this kind of time of transition, I think that'd be good. So we'll put on the agenda, Ms. Davis, for the organizational chart for September. Great. Thank you. Moving right along, 7 transgender students, Title IX update.
Yes, so I think I would, Jerry, you asked us to update,
Susan and Ron.
especially after the changes that the Biden administration made. This has been specifically with respect to whether or not Title IX had transgender students. Title IX generally says that any educational institution that's a recipient of federal financial assistance, like CPS is, must not discriminate against persons, students, employees, etc., on the basis of sex. And administrations have gone back and forth. The Obama administration published a Dear Colleague letter that said they believed it that prohibition of discrimination on the basis of sex does apply to transgender students. The Trump administration quickly withdrew that and said, not believe that Title IX applied to transgender students. The Biden administration has now returned to the former position. I'm proud to say our district has not changed its interpretation. We some time ago updated our anti-discrimination policies to include prohibitions of discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity and expression. Those remain, those prohibitions remain. In terms of guiding our schools, we have long provided guidance to schools that students who are transgender, staff who are transgender, are protected and should be accommodated in their needs. And so that's the guidance that we've continued to give. The Biden administration, I'm pleased to see that they've changed the interpretation, but it has not changed the way CPS has. Glad to answer any questions. I included in your packets a memo that we provide to principals. It's kind of the district.
Great, thank you, Dan. And yeah, you'll note the date of this memo was about a week or so before our last policy. So, thank you, Dan. Eve or Ben?
I just, one question I often find myself asking is like, who else has thought about this? Who might have, and this could be anything, whether it's principal hiring or org charts or policy around restrooms and transgender students. And I just wanted to say thank you for including the CPS notes in here. I just think it's nice to see that we're looking at what other experts have thought about this and what we're learning from them. Thank you.
Well, excellent, thank you, Dan. This is a great memo. I would encourage the media folks who are here to grab a copy of this from Rob. It's pretty significant, I think, that CPS has kind of been on the forefront of this since I've been here, which I'm proud of. So thank you, General Counsel. One more question here, go for it.
Just the intercepting, like, are there any places where I was reading the recommendations on best practices from GLSEN and ACLU and others? Are there portions of this policy where we do deviate from those recommendations?
No, and perhaps better language would be or informed by, or I don't.
You can keep it. I just
yeah.
If we were making a choice to say we're going to know what it wasn't.
I don't think so.
Not that I can
think of right now.
Question, then. Item number 8, review of policy 5321, requirements to wear masks to prevent the spread of COVID-19. Again, social distance perhaps, or wearing it outside. I believe that's why this is back on the agenda.
Yeah, so the policy was passed on August 12th, 2020, prior to the start of last school year. CPS was one of the first districts to adopt a mask policy, I believe.
Yep.
Updates this year, that the board has already on August 4th of this year reaffirmed its decision to require masks at the beginning of the 21-22 school year. The only update we had, and this is consistent with CDC guidance, relates to outdoor wearing a mask. I'm not sure that our policy was a little bit vague on that last year. According to CDC's August 5th, 2021 guidance, in general, people do not need to wear masks when outdoors. CDC recommends that people who are not fully vaccinated wear a mask in crowded outdoor settings or during activities that involve sustained close contact with other people. We've tried to incorporate that indoor-outdoor policy. Welcome your questions.
Thanks, Ray. Committee members? No. No, me neither. So thanks so much. We'll push this forward then, Ms. Davis, for September 13th for the full board. Again, this is something we've already all agreed on. We just had to go through and clean up the policy and make it more relevant to today. Now, number 9, this, of course, was a policy that we asked to be drafted a while ago. This the policy, COVID-19 vaccine requirement for employees, and the policy was created. We talked about it in committee. We polled our community, employees and families, and partners, co-located partners in our buildings for feedback. Ultimately, the full board elected to shelve this policy about a month or so ago with the rise in the Delta variants and the FDA approval of the Pfizer vaccine, which is the vaccine this district has chosen to use for employees, about 70% of whom are vaccinated. It became clear that we should talk about this. So on our Monday board meeting, this was a board matters agenda item, and I gathered feedback from my four colleagues who are not here that I will relay after my committee members have their comments. And at the end of this discussion, ideally make a decision on whether or not to move this to the full board for passage, requiring vaccines of employees, or shelving it again. So I'm going to kick it over to Mr. Hoying, though, first, because there are some red line or blue line changes. Maybe you can discuss with us, and then we'll chat amongst ourselves.
Yeah, so the policy was drafted, I believe, before the May. Yeah, I know. The changes that were made were as a result of a discussion at that meeting. I think this is the policy that was basically shared with the whole board. The only other addition I'll say is subsequent to the May meeting, but about the same time, the board considered this policy. The state of Ohio passed a law that said that no school was allowed to pass a mandatory vaccine policy if that vaccine had not received full approval from the FDA. It's our interpretation that the policy has received, or that Pfizer vaccine has now received full approval, and it's our interpretation that that statute is no longer an impediment to, at least a legal impediment to the board moving forward. Stephanie especially, has done a lot of work just looking at the mandatory vaccine policies that have been. You want to say, if it's okay, I'll kick it to her and say a few words about it.
Yeah. Well, really, we were just kind of looking at what some other districts, I guess, really across the country, were doing that already have the vaccinations. And of course, whenever you think about the mandate, we still would have the religious and the disability exemption. So just kind of looking at the process that would take on. I mean, of course, we would still recommend that we have that in our policy, but then also just some things to really think about, that even if we have a policy like this, what would be kind of the, repercussion, or what would be kind of the follow-up for non-compliance. And so there's been a variety of responses to that. But in a lot of instances, there's the need for sometimes like alternative testing and things of that nature. Ohio State, of course, everybody's probably seen recently, has passed a mandate for vaccines on their campus I believe it was just this week.
Yeah.
And so in their instance, they actually have, their response would be kind of more of a disciplinary one, at least when it comes to their employees. So I think that's really kind of a big component that the committee needs to consider, is just kind of if this mandate, if we do institute this type of mandate, what would our response be in regards to non-compliance?
That is an excellent point. Thank you, Ms. Scott. Anything else from Ms. Scott or Mr. White?
Not immediately. If there are additional questions, yeah.
Okay, well, then we'll open it up. Mr. Lindy, Ms. Bolton.
I have a question. It's my understanding that only the Pfizer vaccine has been approved. So if we're worrying about FDA, would we be limiting this or insisting on Pfizer?
So we've been thinking a lot about that. I don't think so. There could have been employees who got vaccinations through other sources that got the other vaccinations. The key is, though, from our standpoint, I think, at least from just the legal offices, that once a vaccine has become approved by the FDA, the legislation in Columbus, at least the current legislation, which says you can't discriminate against an employee or you can't require them, now we can, because there is a vaccine that has been approved by the FDA. In other words, we think the FDA's approval of at least one vaccine moots out that legislation altogether. And that's consistent with what Governor DeWine said when he signed it. That he believed that a vaccine would be approved before the effective date of the legislation, and thus mooting out. We share that interpretation. So it's a long way of saying we don't believe that legislation in its current form is any kind of impediment to mandate. I will add to that I think, I believe that new legislation has already been introduced. Whether that will be successful or not, I don't know. But the current legislation is not an impediment.
And the new bill is more broad. It doesn't have that language in there as far as the approval and so forth. It's just kind of the prohibitive mandatory vaccination. So there was a hearing this week, but it seems like right now it has been shelved. It doesn't really seem to have a lot of support, a lot of business leaders, and the healthcare industry is really against that new bill. So even though they had comments this week, it's that they haven't voted on it, but the committee should be aware that might be something that pops up later down the road that may again.
What's the new bill say?
That there's new legislation that would say you can't mandate even though it has been.
This one's 248.
Yeah, that's true.
But that's the more restrictive.
I thought that's
244 was the original one,
Was the
248
original
is
one.
the more recent one.
Yeah.
But basically, the distinguishment is that the original one, as far as the approval, waiting for the full approval status, we couldn't discriminate based on that. Whereas the new bill doesn't really have that type of stipulation in there, so it makes it more broad. And so pretty much it would do the same thing in effect as, disallow mandates on vaccines. But the difference is it hasn't been approved. It was just a hearing and comment that they haven't voted on. And it doesn't seem like it, like I said, there's a lot of pushback against it in the business community.
Because they don't want mandatory vaccine?
Right, they do not, the business community.
It's fascinating because everywhere right now, the private sector is doing so much more about mandatory.
No, that's right. That they don't want the legislation.
Right, they don't want the legislation.
They want the choice.
Yeah, that makes, okay, good.
Yeah.
Good.
Perfect. This
Mhm.
Yeah, it's going to get on arrival. That was a good question.
I honestly, I want us to be according to law, but I also am more than willing to not be, if it means our responsibility to our staff and our kids. So I'm very much in favor of us moving on. And somebody crafting a piece that we could live with, literally, keep our schools open. Because I'll tell you, in a number of, I don't know if anybody else has heard this, but I had one of our little people, two of our little people over, and they both told me, and they're in elementary school, that their teachers are telling them that, well, you probably need to take your computer home all the time because we're going to be back virtual in just a matter of whatever. So and these are little people. So I'm concerned about that message. It may or may not be true, but I know it's not coming from the board. And hopefully it's not coming from district staff. It must be coming from individual school sites. But I will do whatever I need to do to keep schools open and the kids here where they should be. And I think that's unfortunately this is part of it.
Before I get over to Mr. Lindy, I just want to highlight for the folks watching and our media friends that if something like this were to get passed by the board, that if somebody has received a vaccine, just to repeat, that was not Pfizer, the interpretation of counsel's office is that is fine, according to current state law. That would be fine, meaning somebody who got another vaccine does not need to go back and get a file.
Yes.
Great. Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Lindy?
Thanks, Mr. Roski. I'd like to first start by saying I'm very open to this policy and inclined to support it. I think that there are some questions I'd love us to talk about before we vote to approve it, and I'm not tied to it if people have different requests. The first thing I wanted to know, I'm not sure, by the way, how many of these we do today or there, but one of them is I would love to hear from the administration. Right then, like, does this make it easier for you all to deliver a fantastic education to kids in Cincinnati, or is it make it hard? So that's one important thing. I would also love to hear from some medical folks, either the children's or the county, just to understand, like, we've got 70+% staff already vaccinated. Like, medically, what's going to be helpful about this last 30%? And again, I ask this from a place of I'm inclined to support this policy. Like, I'm not against it. I just need to be clear on that. Like, here's the benefit. Because some people are not going to like this, but we're clear on why we're going to do it anyway. I think some list of like what other organizations that even across the doesn't be exhaustive, but like some illustrative examples of other large organizations pass vaccines. So we can, ideally we're saying, look, this helps us better deliver for children. It is medically important. We are not alone. We are doing this as part of a growing coalition. Right? And then third, to hear from our partners. You know, I think CFT is an important group there. I think our other labor groups are important. And Member Bowers has mentioned a couple times the importance of mental health providers, and that there might be ways in which this has some unanticipated consequences there. But I think hearing from those groups, I'd like to do this as a big tent. And I think we can get there. But those are the other questions I was thinking.
I can not respond to all, but can respond to some of that. If Susan has anything to add, that would be great. In terms of the administration's position on vaccine, the administration of CPS is incredibly supportive of employees getting. And I think we've demonstrated that by being among the first districts in the state, if not the first district, in make vaccines available to employees. Susan Bunty led a terrific effort in actually in the winter of having our employees vaccinated. We've promoted it at every stage. We were the first offer the students.
Promote versus require.
Promote, yes. I want to say we're supportive of it. In terms of requiring it, we're going to follow the board's direction, of course. There is concern, currently, there is concern about staffing. We have concern about staffing at the beginning of every school year. We have lots of folks who are off over the summer who we don't know until right before the beginning of school that they've decided not to come back, or they've gotten a better job, or that there's some issue. So staffing at the beginning of every school year is an issue. We frankly don't have a very good idea of how this would impact the staffing, but it's at least somewhat of it. And then the third point from my standpoint is ensuring that that it would be better to move forward on something like this with full-throated support of our union partners than without that support. We did some polling of our union groups in the spring, and we think that their feedback even then may have changed to now. AFT has come out in support of vaccine mandates. So interested in hearing what obviously the union presidents have to say, but as between going forward unilaterally or going forward with their support.
So I agree with everything that Mr. Wayne just said. I do know that we are in active discussions with the health now around boosters. As you all are probably aware, boosters have been approved, particularly for Pfizer, and so we are moving ahead with that. I too share the concern about staffing, but it's more at an anecdotal level. We don't have information or data yet about how that would be impacted. And as each of you, our board members have said this morning, all of us want to remain open this year. We are deeply committed to that, and we recognize that our littlest ones don't have a vaccine available. So one way to assist with that, in addition to provide vaccines to our adults.
And what's more, if I may, not only an additional way, but it's proven the most effective way, right? By doctors, scientists, who I believe. So, Mr. Lane, I'll let you keep going.
No, that's it. I think please see me as somebody who's inclined to support this. I may be, I don't know that everybody always agrees with me on this, but like I do want our administration to have an opinion. You know, like I don't, I would prefer that to be deferred to the board. Like I think, you know, our job is to check that there is a vision and a strategy that is going to deliver for kids. And I'd be excited to back that. Once we have a chance to ask questions about it, hear it. But I think, you know, I think this is likely a get into yes situation as opposed to.
And I would just respond to that with saying, I certainly value the administration's opinion too, but when it comes to something like this, I mean, this is not, and I don't want them to have to bear the brunt of this. That's our job. Because it will be on the popular with some folks, and I just don't think it's fair to ask to say, do this or don't do this with something of this gravity, in my opinion. Their opinion doesn't matter to me. I think they've made it clear they support vaccines, but as far as this policy, that's us. Yeah.
To Mr. Lindy's point, I think that was something we said a couple of months ago. We wanted to make it a big thing, and Calvin's been very good about, you know, worrying about the partners and folks that are in our buildings, and we certainly would want the support of our union leadership and membership. I too am very worried about the fact that there will be members of our staff from every work group there is, and probably every school, who will refuse to do this. And that's just the way it is. And to their credit, if that's because of the belief or whatever, you know, that religiously they will have the opportunity to not have to do this. Or if there's other issues that will allow them to not have to do it, but so be it. But people will quit, and we will lose staff. And I'm willing to do that because I'm not together sure that I want the kids that, or the grown-ups that are feeding our kids, or cleaning up before or after them, or teaching them, or coaching them to be in a position to expose them to this Delta virus or anything else like that that might come along. So I also understand we're having some absenteeism now, which is alarming people. And it's some of it's related to COVID, supposedly. So I think we're very close always to being at that point where our previous superintendent and administrative group put that wonderful chart together as to when we can operate. I don't want to reach that number. I care more about that number than I do about the Hamilton County health number, because that's really about shutting down the school. So I agree with Ben that we need to have that kind of support, but I don't want to delay what we're doing today. I'd rather have all that discussion in the whole full board and take this out of committee, get it back to the full board and see where we are and kind of call the question on this one.
I agree, and just again, I'm inclined to support it. I'm not here against it. I think when we have that conversation, one request I'd like to make is have somebody from either Dr. Amin or Dr. Musman or Dr. Khan, because in just in the last couple of minutes, there are a series of medical assertions that I think are probably right. I don't know, and I think one of the things I've learned just over the last year and a half is it's just good to check, you know, like and what has changed with the Delta variant, what hasn't. How do we know? And that seems like easy.
I agree with that, and I was going to suggest that we had somebody come, because I think that's a good suggestion to have somebody at the full board. But I agree with Ms. Bolton that we get this out of committee and we put it before the board on September 13th. At that time, have a medical professional. There was someone else who suggested this too, I thought. You're talking about the medical professional piece. Wasn't there another?
I was thinking to children to the county.
Got it. Okay. And Mr. Hoying brought up a valid point too, I believe, in that when we polled our organized labor friends and our community friends and our co-located partner friends back months ago, a lot has changed since then. the variants have changed. AFT's position, I wouldn't say it's changed, but it's become known. My position has changed. I think other court positions have changed from like, well, it's nice that we have this, but do we need it right now to? I'll say I do think this is needed right now because, like Ms. Bolton, I do not want to go virtual again. And I am concerned about the numbers as I brought up on Monday. So I said I want to have our health and safety updates again. I feel like every day I get an email and a memo about new COVID cases. There's been over, 30 cases in school starting among students, probably more. I haven't checked today. That's concerning to me. How many are there?
For students, we're at 111 since August, but that's since August 1st. So some of that's, but we're at 111 students. 400% glasses on, 52%.
So that is why I support this. And so I think we need to move on it. So let's move it to, I don't have any issue with the language. We've gone over the language. Does anyone have any issue with the specific? No. Just the date. We don't have a date, but that's probably not a question for the clerk to work on that. So move this forward to September 13th. Put it on the board agenda, but the question I have, just the one question I have is, are we moving it forward for passage? I mean, I'm inclined to do that. I just want to check. When I say moving it forward, it's not a board map.
No, it's a passage with the caveat that that's suggesting that we have a full-blown presentation about the necessity for it or no necessity, support or no support. And I do think we pencil in a date, and this is critical to get this done. If indeed there are 4 votes on the board.
Pencil in the date today.
I think so. I think you got to fill the blanks in. I mean, this is serious stuff.
I'm amenable to that.
And I don't know if we know of any other district regionally that is doing this.
They're not.
Well, I was going to add that there's not a school district in Ohio yet. As I mentioned, Ohio State, and there's a couple other universities in the state of Ohio. Probably the closest regional would be Indianapolis. Indianapolis Public Schools, they require a mask for all unvaccinated, so that's how they're implementing it. Vaccinated, then you have to wear the mask. Everyone is, doesn't have to.
I'm sorry, let me interrupt you.
No, you're fine.
This is actually a question I have. With legally, I know that under the old law, couldn't discriminate against staff based on it. Legally, could we do what Indianapolis is doing and say either you vaccinate or you wear a mask?
That law hasn't changed.
So, our opinion, you're saying about the discriminating between a group that has been vaccinated
Let's
and
say our
unvaccinated.
policy says either A, you got to show you got it, or B, you got to wear it. Does that violate Ohio law?
Our view is under the current law that was passed, which says you can't discriminate against a person who has not received a vaccine as described in paragraph A. Paragraph A says one approved by COVID. So we believe currently that law is moved.
I mean, I would just say, I may be outvoted on this. Okay.
Yeah.
I might be outvoted on this. Yeah, but for me to say, imagine 2 different policies. Policy 1 says everybody's got a vaccine, period. Policy 2 says either you get a vaccine. For me to have an opinion on which of those 2 is better, I'd like to hear from them. I think I would be open to whichever one of those. I think the administration looks best like you. That's just me.
To that point, I was the one, I think, on the board really being relatively ferocious about not having to wear a mask if you are vaccinated. I just think that was a situation. I was ferocious about it. I gave up on it because the law said we couldn't do it. But now, even if the law is moved, and you're a practitioner, both of you have been in the schools, it's unenforceable. Unless I know, and I have a list that I'm not allowed to have, as to who can walk around with them. It can't enforce it.
Even though Andy's doing it.
They're not enforcing it.
I don't know. I just think it's
I think they're going to end up doing what we're doing for their first quarters open.
And that's just one example. I mean, other examples give alternatives, not vaccinated, and there's weekly testing. I mean, there's multiple kinds of, you know, it's not everyone, that was just the closest example, but the majority of districts that are doing this across the country, that's usually the alternative, either vaccinated or subject yourself to weekly testing or the discipline option.
And for me, on that, if I could, you can't enforce the mask or no mask. And more particularly, I asked at the last board meeting, how do you do weekly testing on all 6,000 employees? Or are you going to say we're going to do it randomly? What purpose does that serve? Is that we have to be able to do what we have to do to keep the schools open. Because if it's not even September, we got 111, we got 50 some, whatever it is. And at school sites, people are talking, well, you might be going to have to do it. And it's unfortunate.
And the fact of the matter is that children are dying around this country. And the Delta variant, the Lambda variant, go after children much more harshly than they do anyone else. And while I am not a doctor, and I want a doctor here at September 13th, I work with doctors. And I get these reports every day so I can do my day job, and it's terrifying. And children are dying. So we can go around and around and try to make, at this point, I really, want to make sure kids don't die, family members don't die, and that we keep our school buildings open so that kids can learn. And there's no better way to do it, according to science. Now we need the doctors here to help prove that. I get that. But anyway. I do have questions from my colleagues that I'd like to pass on, because I promised everyone I'd do that on Monday, and then if we have, might have responses from the committee members to these as well. So I'm going to start with Ms. Bates. Ms. Bates said to requested to look at other vaccination policies and make it. We did, I think, before this, but passing that one along again. She did ask, though, she called me this week and asked, so people may have seen that Delta Airlines is requiring vaccinations. And along with their requirement, Delta Airlines said if you do not want to get a vaccination, so back to the non-compliance piece that Ms. Scott was talking about, if you do not want to get the vaccination, then they are increasing the insurance policy of individuals who opt out. And Ms. Bates wanted me to pass that along with, I believe, the sort of question of, is that something that is possible? Delta is certainly different than we are. Is that something that's possible for a big public entity like us?
Don't know, but we can look into that.
Right. And then we can report back on the 13th on that. So Ms. Bates is good. Ms. Bowers, as always, Ms. Bolton brought this up. I think Mr. Lindy too. Ms. Bowers is bullish, and I love it about our co-located partners being a professional herself. She wanted to express the importance of this if indeed it passes, to our partners and why we're doing it. And her second piece was there's already a shortage, and this may disincentivize. Of course, this came up already, but I wanted to pass that along for Ms. Bowers. Mr. Lindy, who is here, and already said that. He said that. Mr. Lindy said that. Ms. Bolton said that. President Jones says that the timing is right to reconsider this, and she echoed Ms. Bates that we look at other policies. Vice President Messer noted that we need to do this. It is nice after the past year and a half plus. It seems like there's some coalescing around this issue. I think I am always remiss to ever speak on behalf of anybody that's not me, but I do feel like say all 7 of us want kids in school and don't want it hurt. Mr. Messer says we got to do everything we can to keep kids in the classroom. He also noted something we discussed here, that like my employer, Children's Hospitals, lost people. A lot of people left. You know, they're doing big hiring fairs and things. So Mr. Messer wanted to reiterate that, you know, there will be attrition. And he's not wrong, of course, this has come up here, but wanted to pass that along for Mr. Messer. So that's what I have from our other colleagues, but in closing, I want to give Mr. Lindy or Bolton, before we start talking about a date, and we can move on to our last.
I just have two last thoughts. One is on the issue of this Delta variant being more different. I just want to say that I think that's the most important thing. You sounds like you're a lot closer to the research on this professionally. My request would just be if you send me some of this.
Sure.
Because it's not stuff that I've seen, but it doesn't mean right. And I'd like to learn more. The second thing is, I just think there are so many trade-offs, so many unknowns. One of the reasons I really want to ask for an opinion from the because I think the group that's going to have to make it all work is you all. And so the group that's going to best internalize, and I'm not saying that we always do exactly what they're going to hear why, but I think, you know, we can net out all kinds of different ways. I really want to hear from on the 13th. Worst case, anyway. And that's my.
The 13th policy will be on the agenda for passage. We will have, and we'll get to the date, we will have some medical professional there to speak. At Mr. Lindy's request, the administration will give some sort of feedback on these.
An opinion on what they think the right thing is.
An opinion. I still maintain that. I don't know that that's something we should ask of them, but we can do that. And then we'll fill in this date here. We'll put it before the board. We'll go from there. But we do need to have a discussion about the non-compliance. And that may very well, that probably needs to be a full board discussion. Mr. Hoying has again, in my efforts to summarize an enormously robust conversation, Mr. Hoying and Scott then will look into the piece about the insurance that the states was interested in, continue to cross-reference other policies around the country. And lastly, I think, so if this were to get passed on September 13th, to Ms. Bolton's point, we should pencil something in. We can't put something on an agenda with a blank. So if this passes on September 13th, what is a reasonable?
Could we back up just a little? I think the news, at least for staff and the community, would be that the policy and equity committee is recommending for passage, or is merely passing. I think this is important because that would have an impact on the date.
Yes.
And we don't usually vote in our committees, but we do have recommendations for passage. And I think we have to make sure that that becomes part of the news for our employees and our families, because if you wait too long to do all of this, that date's going to take you into almost second quarter. And by that time, it's possible the damage has been done. So I think there should be an understanding of expediting this. I think we also have to, I'm not that interested in whether, as Ben suggested, what the administration thinks we should do. My question to the administration are you prepared to implement if we do this? Because that is the question. And are we willing, and do we have the stomach to implement this and agree to it and take the heat if indeed you do have people that refuse and that we like and value and whatever. So that's my question. How would are they prepared to implement? And I think we need to be able to tell people that it's coming out of committee recommending for passage, so that we can give people a heads up on the date that we choose, because you're not going to be able to say 2 weeks. You're going to have to give people a little bit more time, perhaps. Are we willing to provide vaccinations here for employees. So that has to be part of the understanding too, to make it completely convenient. My issue is that the mask piece is unenforceable, and the insurance, being penalized, that doesn't make anybody get vaccinated.
I agree with that. I don't necessarily think that's the right way to go either. I wanted to pass it.
No, and I do think that to Pam's point, and it will cost us also, I think that if you're in our building as a co-located, because that was the emphasis, it's not just coming in or out necessarily, but if you're co-located with us, you're going to fight for this.
All right, so great point. So I will ask, and then I have one more question. But I'll ask Mr. Lindy then. So your stance is that this is coming out of here as a recommendation. Policy and Equity Committee recommends vaccination requirement policy for passage. So that's one. Mr. Lindy, do you have a?
That's fine. I think we should recommend, based on where you two are, basically, like, I really am I'm fine with us. I think longer term, I do want to argue that we ask our administrators. But that's like me on my governance thing. I get a lot out, and I don't want that. Particularly when both of you are so clear where you are, and I'm inclined to vote for it anyway. I think it's not appropriate for you to hold that up. It's more about how we do business, bigger picture.
As am I. So, what's that?
Oh, you just raised me.
I just wanted to clarify, so I would ask Dr. Mussman or Dr. Mead to come on the 13th, the board meeting, is that accurate?
To speak to all that, Mr. Lindy, to speak to, you would want them to come speak.
Yeah, I think specifically to a couple things. So, if we go from 70% staff vaccinated to 100%, what's the benefit of that? I think also, how do we think about trade-offs between things like everybody gets vaccine version, everybody vaccines or masks version, everybody vaccines or tests once a week version? How do we think about those? And I also think just some information about the Delta variant kids, particularly under an environment where everybody is masked and we are doing the other kind of Swiss cheese models that we're doing. Those are all questions that I think, and not because I disagree with this position. I just think being able to air that publicly and be clear about our reasoning is going to be important.
Thank you.
That's good. Be quiet. So before we get to the date, I'm not, what's that?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, that's.
What's that? Not yet. Almost though. It would be super soon. He's ready to go. He's ready to go.
Lost us 30 yesterday.
I don't want to muddy the waters. I really don't. I don't want to bring up a whole other thing. But if this passes, is there a world where we begin adding the COVID-19 vaccination requirements for students, like we do for a myriad amount of other diseases? And again, I'm not trying to start a brand new conversation. No. I'm just looking for a pulse check from you, community members.
I'm not prepared to go there, but I am prepared to have the administration report back on what is their strategy to vaccinate our teenagers.
Okay, I'm fine with that. And the other
Sounds good.
Within the school day.
Yes.
All right. So what kind of date are we talking about then? I'm open to anything. Is it end of first quarter? Is it quicker than that? And this is where it's going to depend on the administration's ability to obviously administer.
Only one, if it's only like the first shot, you could make it as early as October 1. After passage on the 13th. That might be aggressive, but if it's only one and we're supplying the shots.
And we're supplying them for co-located partners as well.
Yes.
So I would have to check with the health department as our vaccine provider to, that's about the same time that boosters are going to be rolling out, but it could be possible that we do that concurrently. So, which would be actually wonderful. So, but let me check with them on it.
So it sounds like, I don't know that we will be able to pencil in a date. We could pencil in, Dan, let me see what people think about this. Employees and co-located partners must be vaccinated by parenthetical note, a date to be determined September 13th after administration is heard with.
And I can step out and call if that would be helpful.
Right now?
So that-
Oh, that would be helpful. Okay, thank you. All right, so we'll wait till Susan gets back, but right now we know that this is going before the full board as a recommendation for approval at a 6:30 p.m. board meeting, correct? It's
Yes.
Monday. Okay. Excellent. So moving right along to transportation policies.
Just easier conversation.
That first half of the agenda took like 6 minutes. Right.
So we were asked to add these to the agenda. These are the two policies that relate to transportation, 8600.01, the supervision of transported students, and 8600.02, which relates to some of our the specifics of transportation provided by the district. Glad to answer any questions.
I know, we were going to go out and talk with each other. Questions, Ms. Bolton?
I have no questions. I have a belief that the current metro plan that we are engaged in, against our will and against our resolution, and against our better judgment, in many areas is out of compliance with these two policies. Serious out of compliance with these two policies. And that we have been forced by a tax-supported monopoly who offers a particular service and has for a number of decades had to change what they did for their own business plan. And I think we have to review these policies. I think we even might have to have sort of an ad hoc review of these policies and not wait for another month in the policy committee to look as to where this current plan that's being implemented is outside of our policies. And we have to figure out, do we keep our policies? Are we changing our policies to meet Metro's demands? Or are we going to be asking Metro to meet our demands under new, perhaps more relevant policies than these? I think this is a top priority besides the vaccination. And it is time sensitive.
I would echo that. I mean, it's no secret. I feel that the Metro plan is acceptable for our students. And that said, Monday, if this is something that it has to stick around for one reason or another, I don't believe that it does. But if it for some reason does, then folks at Metro with decision-making authority need to tell us that so we can start working on something, because their own communications people are on the news saying that extra routes can come back.
Yeah.
So I don't know what's going on, but right now, I'm not inclined, I do agree with this, that our own policies here, we are, through no fault of our own, but except perhaps, rogue elements, working not on behalf of the board, through no fault of our own, are not in compliance with this. So I think we need to agree.
I will also say that the district and SORA has now been invited to the Budget and Finance Committee, City Council, chaired by David Mann, to testify Monday at 1 o'clock. Because according to Mr. Mann's statement, he doesn't understand why we are not somehow collaborating and how these two organizations haven't been able to place student safety first. So there is that time crunch as well. But there are parts of these policy that it's just obvious. I mean, 15 minutes before, 15 minutes later, that's when we're supposed to be able to get to be delivered and picked up. It's a simple sentence. In this policy, very frankly, it would appear that we really made the director of transportation, who helped write this one policy, significantly more powerful than maybe other directors. And so there are those sorts of things. And we are not putting safety first, because we have now have our kids at virtually every bus stop. This is not in keeping with the time frame. And more significantly than anything besides the 15 and 15 is the responsibility. Whose responsibility is it? I don't want to say the word liable or liability, but even the way this policy is crafted, I'm confused as to who is responsible. Because we are mentioning parents and family, and we're mentioning schools, and then we're mentioning the metro or the bus, because this is both yellow and metro. I think families would be shocked that they're going to be responsible when their kid is making a transfer. This is something that needs to be worked on right away.
Ms. Bunty, thank you so much. Just derail this pun not intended for a moment. For the vaccines, the health department, Cincinnati Health Department, can administer boosters and first vaccines together as early as September 20th. Special sessions at Duke Energy Center if needed. So September 20th is the earliest. Thank you. So Ms. Bolton still maintains October 1. I am not married to a date, so I have Mr. Lindia. So October 1 seems
as long as
fair.
we're facilitating their first shot.
Yes.
So the way this reads, this says employees must be vaccinated by, not first shot by. So this is 2 shots. So
First shot.
So maybe a language change.
Yep.
And code enforcers must have received their first vaccination by, because
Maybe and second vaccination.
within the 2 week, yes.
That's good.
Not by a date, but within the 2 week, yes. Correct. Does that make sense, Mr. Horn?
Yes.
All right.
Excellent.
Put this one to bed for now. Okay.
And just to clarify, it would be similar to how we did it at Duke before. So when they reserved 2,000 spots for us, and so that we would have our employees who needed booster shots being able to move through to get their booster shots, and then we would also have separate slots held for first-time vax folks. So then we would be able to use the same site and the same staff.
Great. Thank you. All right, transportation. Are we done with that? I totally co-opted that one. Not good with. Are we finished with transportation?
I don't know if we're finished with it. I mean, we need to have a work plan or something. We can't wait till the third Thursday or the last Thursday of next month. Something has to be happening here. And I think part of it is that, it's my understanding, from the Vice President Messer yesterday, that the whole CAL, besides us dealing with the RFP or the search firm selection coming before the court on the 1st, everything is supposed to be about transportation on October 1st. I mean, September 1st. So is it possible for General Counsel to review these 2 policies and report back to the full board? Because this is full board work at this point. This isn't just us. Agree with that, Chairman?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. But,
And I hope we individually review these two policies. And I don't even see where the responsibility piece is dealt with when kids are having to transfer and wait at a bus stop. What does the law require of us? Who is, that was one of the few things in that meeting was sort of that at least somebody wrote down that was there. But whose liability is this? And whose responsibility is this? Is the transfer piece and the kids getting to the first bus stop to be picked up, then doing the transfer, is that a break in the responsibility? Are the parents responsible while the kid waits at the bus stop for the transfer? Even the time frame is now ridiculous, and we have to have all that data that the superintendent made that great list. That data will show us just how out of compliance we are with it. Metro plan. So I would hope that we would be doing something on that September 1st, framing this issue as something. No. Thank you.
Mr. Lindy? Good?
I don't think I have anything to add beyond what's been said already.
Well, I don't know. Continued review of policies, probably not. Are we out anything, Dan? Okay, great. So for next month right now, we have a couple things on there already. I'm sure things will come up. We can potentially continue our review, Dan, next month when it's not quite as packed. Of course. I have one piece of other business I'm going to pass along, and Ms. Bunty's here for this too, I believe. This came up before this meeting. Ms. Bates made me aware, and I know the superintendent's been made aware of this as well. So there were, story, if I may, there were 3 children at one of our schools who tested positive for health department COVID. And then they followed up with a PCR test at Children's Hospital. That came back negative. And they're not being allowed back into the school. It's being said because of policy. And Ms. Bates suggested that our policy, now the policy regarding COVID quarantine, so again, for the edification of the public and folks who are here who may not know this, our quarantine policies are located in our attendance policy. And in that attendance policy, it already says the district will follow current CDC guidelines for quarantine isolation when someone is exposed to COVID-19. Individual circumstances may impact one's recovery and ability to resume, etc. Time of communication, required documentation, circumstances may be taken into consideration. So I feel like that's already in, I don't know, so
just a bit of additional information, and I don't want to share too much, but just please know that situation was reviewed by the supervising epidemiologist at the health department and the medical director of the Cincinnati Health Department, both of whom had conversations with the family. And so I think there's additional information that I don't necessarily feel comfortable sharing in a public forum, but I'm happy to provide details after this.
Yeah, and you feel free to call Ms. Bates. She was interested in having it come on, and I think it is, what's her name, but when I went and looked and checked our attendance policy, it looks like it's already covered all. Okay. Great. Okay, any other business, other business? Mr. Lindy.
Wait, thanks, Mr. Rusty. Back in the beginning of the year, the questions I was asking was, do we do any work in the policy committee checking to see whether or not policies are being followed?
Yeah, we did.
I think we have 4 meetings left before the end of the year, September, October, November. I think it's great we have Laura here, because I think one of my questions was going to be, could we do something before the year is over with this policy that is something in the category of checking to see whether policies are being followed? I have one thought about how we could do this, but I'm in no way tied to it. It's the spirit of it that I think I care about. One idea is over the next meeting or two between Ms. Bolton, Ms. Vorosky, myself, and the administration, we could narrow to some set of policies, say between 4 and 8, that we felt were particularly important to know about, and then ask our internal auditor to do some checking. to see whether or not that's happening or not. And then we get a report sometime before the end of the year on what that looks like in the lived experience of specific other schools, with some recommendations on what we do. Either wins to celebrate, opportunities for improvement, but that part of our work is about not just writing them and revising them, but checking to see how they're actually happening. And Lauren, you're the expert on that, or Dan or Stephanie, you have made a different idea of how to hear about, not at all tied to how. I'm a little bit tied to when we do it.
Yeah.
Great idea.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, totally.
So our homework is, you want our homework for next time for Ms. Bolton and myself to come with some policies?
Yeah, small number. Yeah, I think that sounds great.
All right, so we'll log our homework in minutes, and then we'll come up with some administration, if some you think are germane. I feel like most of mine will have to do with transportation and COVID.
Racism policy, equity policy,
Yeah.
all kinds of stuff.
No, there's tons. No, it's good.
Awesome, thanks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hello. I don't know if we finished. I don't know if we finished, but can general counsel at least come back with some thoughts about the transportation policies?
Yeah.
Whether and how the metro plan meets them or doesn't?
Yes.
Thank you. And can that be September 1st
Sure.
at the CAB?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Borowski?
Please hold on a moment. Got somebody's ready.
Yeah. All right, so what we're going to do, Ms. Solis, we'll let you go last. That's all right, like normal. I know you got a lot. We want to hear it all. So everyone else, as always, you will have 2 minutes to speak. Do we have any speakers aside from the one?
We do. We have 5 speakers.
5 speakers, Mr. Wilson? Excellent. So 2 minutes a pop. Do we have a timekeeper, Mr. Boyne? Sure, timekeeper again? Thanks, man. You're so good at that. You are really good at that. I know. Thank God. Good thing he's good. All right, Mr. Wilson, let's go.
Mr. Morowski, I have a question from the media. They'd like to know if there is a period for them to ask questions.
They can talk to us after the meeting. Yep.
After the meeting.
After the meeting. The meeting's adjourned. Yeah. My colleagues, if you want to grab one of them or me, we're more than happy. Yeah, definitely. Chat.
Thank you, Chairman.
Go for it.
All right, we have five speakers this morning. We are going to start with Beth Van Wassenholt, a parent from Pleasant Ridge. Go ahead, Beth. Beth, I'm going to unmute your mic.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Go ahead.
Can't hear you, Beth.
Hold on. I got it, Beth. Don't do anything.
Doctor.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Morowski. Okay. Thank you so much for your time this morning. I'm glad to hear that the board is moving forward, or that the policy committee is going to move the policy forward for vaccinations. I know that there's been discussion to board member Lindy's point about the 70% of staff that are vaccinated, but those 30% that are not. I just hope as we move forward, and I know that you all are doing that, but that we're really centering the health and safety of all of our students that are in, that are in the schools. If you have a student who, in that 30%, if there's a teacher or staff member who is not vaccinated, and we can't forget those 30%. I know that you're thinking possibly herd immunity and all of that, but we just have to follow the scientists. So I'm so glad to hear that you will be having the folks from Cincinnati Children's there, and that you'll be getting information from them. I just hope that there's transparency with this whole process. I am deeply concerned that according to the CPS dashboard, just since the first day of school, 42 students and 21 staff members. And I know that I think it would be important that the board is transparent also in how the decisions are being made. So possibly sharing that chart again so that everyone knows kind of where we're at. I want my child to be in school. He is a third grader. He's not eligible to receive the vaccine yet, but I am immune compromised. And last year was really rough. He was, for most of last year, except for 3 weeks, he was home with me. So anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you. Our next speaker is going to be Megan Jones, followed by Tom Gallagher. Megan, go ahead.
Hi there, can everyone hear me?
Yes, can you turn on your camera, please, Ms. Jones?
I did. It's saying it's on.
Oh, go for it. Just go ahead. It's fine.
Okay. So let me see if I pop it out, but no, it's definitely saying it's on. Okay. It says my video is enabled. Everyone can see me now, but maybe you guys are, that head is shutting me down. So first and foremost, I just wanted to thank you guys for taking the time to let me speak this morning, and then also for your response and proactive nature with the masks. I do appreciate that, and I've been very, very thankful for your response. I wanted to reach out because I'm a little concerned about the current COVID policy. So Board Member Morowski, you brought up a case actually that involves my children. Essentially what happened is we were notified on Sunday evening that we might have had possible outdoor exposure to someone who had tested positive with a rapid test. Our exposure was outdoor. It was unmasked, but they were with them for probably less than 15 minutes. In an abundance of caution, because my mother is high risk and I take care of her, she has vasculitis and relapsing polychondritis, I took my sons to get a rapid test, knowing that we were supposed to see my mom, and it had been over a week since we had seen her. Those results came back positive. I immediately called the school and immediately did all contact tracing, as a responsible person should be doing. During that time, the next morning, I got a call that the child who we had been exposed to, our only exposure, mind you, I believe the lawyer said that it would be less. We're already talking about large groups. Children don't need to be unmasked or need to be masked per the CDC. I did this out of my own caution. He had tested negative for a PCR. In less than 24 hours from the initial rapid test, my children got 2 negative PCRs. We had my entire family tested, all negative PCRs. I then reached out, and so I was asking if we could send my children back. I was told we could not. Dr. Mussman sent an email that had some community settings that describe asymptomatic what should happen. If you're asymptomatic and antigen positive, but with no symptoms, it says that you should isolate. However, antigen positive has a number 3 subscript that reads that antigen positive may need confirmatory testing if the person has a low likelihood of SARS-CoV-19 infection. My children had a low.
You can wrap up. You're at time.
I absolutely will. I think we need to have stated policy, because what is happening is I have had different people. I would like to see in writing the COVID policy, because right now they are telling me that my children's tests need to be at the same day, but the CDC guidelines that were sent over to me were told that they needed to have confirmatory testing, which we now have that is negative. I'm looking for the written policy, because right now in the letters sent from the school and the letters sent to me from Dr. Mussman do not have to confirm any of this information, and it is all conflicting. We need something that is standard.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. We'll follow up. The administration, Ms. Bunchy said that, yes, we'll follow up with you, Ms. Jones. Thank you for your concern. We want to make sure that we have our kids in school, as we've stated numerous times today. So thank you again. Rob, what's next?
Next up is Tom Gallagher, Pleasant Ridge. Tom, go ahead.
All right, thank you all for your time today. I'm going to follow up on Megan, because I'm one of the families that's affected and set this whole situation in motion. There are currently 6 kids who are not at Pleasant Ridge Montessori because of false positives, all administered at the same place in Hyde Park. And these students are being punished for a mistake that was made somewhere along the way. And everyone that I've talked to, with the city, with the health department, with the school, is citing the CDC recommendations. But yet they're ignoring the CDC recommendation that states exactly what Megan just read to you, that an asymptomatic individual with no known exposure, which qualifies as all 3 kids with false positives, asymptomatic, no known exposure, positive rapid test should get a confirmatory result via PCR. All 3 have received that. All 3 are negative. Furthermore, every single family member is negative. There is not COVID present in any of our homes, yet these children are at home. It's affecting another home for another kid who played with our families over the weekend. He's not allowed back in school. So right now you're affecting 13 people and 6 students of your school that are not permitted in the building. After the last year plus and everything they even endured back and forth with school, finally back to a routine for 2 days and now yanked out of school. You talk about the well-being of the students. Nobody is considering the mental health of our students who are not only not in school and not in a routine and not with their friends, but when they return, they're marked as the students who had COVID. And they're going to walk around the halls and be looked at as the kids who had COVID. And they don't. They didn't have COVID. There are false positives across the country. Everyone says this doesn't happen. Rice University had a major situation where it happened. The Oakland Public Schools had a major situation where this happened. And the district is letting us down. We've been at PRM for 8 years. We have 2 children there. The Jones have been there almost the exact same timeline. The other family as well. We are all staunch supporters of Cincinnati Public Schools. I'm a public school product, and this is insane.
Thank you, Tom. We will absolutely be following up. Thank you for your comments. Mr. Wilson.
Yes, so that is everyone who is virtual. We now have Chandra Monroe Williams, Clark Montessori Parent.
Hello, Ms. Monroe Williams.
Hi, thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
I just want to keep it brief. Again, thank you for inviting me in. I appreciate that. I believe that if our children have to be in school, that people should be able to come to the building and be in meetings. I'm the parent of the child, Maya Williams, who was photographed trying to pass to school. Our school moved from 8 o'clock from 7:30 for healthy start time. In order to catch the bus, my child has to get up at 4:45 a.m. versus the 6 o'clock she normally would get up in order to sit at a bus stop that is not surrounded by anyone. If you talk about liability, because I talk about liability, I did follow my child to the bus stop. I did follow her to the bus route. I hold you liable because you have accepted taxpayers' money. You have entered into a contract that is the worst contract I've ever seen with the provider who is saying they will reinstate it if you push back, and you're not pushing back. So if something happened to my child on the bus, I would be upset with you. I'm upset with both of you as taxpayers because I passed a levy for both of you because I thought we were going to extend and maintain, expand and maintain. As a result of that, my daughter has developed hives. She's traumatized, so she refuses to get up on a bus, and I'm taking her like I have for the last 15 years. The other thing now is I have a carpool because I have a bunch of traumatized parents and kids who ask if they can't leave work. They start as early as 6 o'clock in the morning. So they now have their kids in a pandemic in my car. So that's a risk that I'm willing to take. Their kids, some of these kids are not vaccinated. Some of them are not old enough to be vaccinated. And my concern about this is when you talk about policy and equity is about understanding and being able to put yourself in the situation of the parents and the students that are in there. If you're not talking to us, 2 minutes does not give you a chance to engage with us. If you're not talking to us and engaging with us and understand why we're concerned, then what you're doing is not representing our voice. And that's the only thing I'm asking you to do is find a forum to improve your communication and engagement with us so people who don't have any kids in any stake in this process can actually understand how we feel about it.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Ms. Monroe Williams. And this, that's one story of many of why we do have to push back. This is not good perfect. President Sellers.
I have a lot. We do have a packed agenda. But thankfully, we're in person, and I have everything here organized. I am not going to start with number 1 on my list. I'm going to start with number 4 about the vaccine, because I believe at this point, vaccine and transportation are the 2 most prior issues that should be where the most focus should be. I do want to talk, everybody keeps talking about 70% of our employees have been vaccinated. That number I do not believe is accurate. That's how many people were vaccinated when we did it in the winter.
Since then, there are teachers who and other employees who have gone to their doctors to get vaccinated. There are people who have gone to other clinics to get vaccinated. There were people who went and got different vaccines because they could not do Pfizer. And so I wish we would just quit throwing around that 70% because that's not an accurate number. Based on my information, about 85% of teachers are vaccinated. But also, 80% of the teachers felt that the mandatory vaccine with termination was not appropriate. There are AFT guidelines, and I know Dan talked about it. I think Ben and Mike, several people talked about the AFT support of mandatory vaccines. Now, if you really look at the policy and listen and not just read the headline like too many people do, that AFT guideline says they support it with mandatory negotiations of what that's going to look like. Now, when you say mandatory vaccines, the first thing employees think is, I'm going to be fired if I don't get this. That's not what all these other cities are saying. So we have to be perfectly clear. Number one, how will this be managed? And will students who also can be vaccinated be included? Because I have grandchildren in the district and they can't be vaccinated. One's at a high school and one's at an elementary school and they can't be vaccinated. They're getting it from their friends, not from the teachers. The teachers are getting it from kids. And the 21 staff members who have been tested positive, most of them have been vaccinated and they have breakthrough cases that they're getting it from the kids because they're eating lunch and breakfast in the rooms where the masks are off. So first we have to begin, and I'm glad we have mandatory masks. I think that's absolutely has to be continued. I think we should do, and I talked to one of the state senators last night during the other board meeting, and he sent me all the guidelines. And it is 220, I'll read exactly what he said. He said that 211 became House Bill 244. And he said that in that bill, because now there are vaccines that are available, that districts and employers can't discriminate because it's been fully approved. The language hinged on the status of the vaccine being experimental. They're going to send me a memo today to confirm all of this and how it is. But I think that before we start terminations, we should start mandatory weekly testing. It wouldn't be for 6,000 employees. It would probably be for a few hundred. And I think that that would be a lot of people who would say, yes, I'm ready to go get the vaccine now. I think that if you don't want to mandate student testing for 12 and above, I think that you need to have a strong public service campaign of why students should be vaccinated. And also, even for our own employees, we have not had vaccination since February, I think, March for the second shot. So this is all stuff that you need to think about and you need to talk about. I have not had negotiations about this, and this is a term of employment. All I have is stuff that I read on the news or on Twitter. That's not negotiating. Negotiating is where we sit down and come up with some agreements. And number one, how will it be monitored? I don't know that we have the ability to do that. You don't even know who's vaccinated at this point. Number two, I don't want to have a pediatrician come in here and tell us about adults. I think we need to have a public health expert who will come in and talk to us about this. A pediatrician is not a public health expert. And so I think that by September 13th, there needs to be some engagement. We need to make sure that all of the labor groups are represented, and we need to sit down and have a conversation. And I'm not sure if by September 13th, that is the date that you are doing the presentation, that we're going to be ready to roll it out, to be finished by the mandate and have injections by October the 1st. I'm fully supportive of vaccines, but I do know that there are people who are very, very fearful. They're fearful for many different reasons. But one of them is they're fearful because they saw people who felt bad the next couple of days. They had fevers, they had, mild symptoms. Some people were with fever for a couple of days. Are we going to have recovery days for employees when you mandate these vaccines? All of these things are things that we should be talking about, and we do need to think about what are the details before you have a policy. And then lastly with this, termination, because that has not happened anywhere in this state, and where they have done it even in the private sectors and some public sectors where they mandated it, there's lawsuits.
We're not talking about termination.
I know, but that's what people say, mandatory vaccine.
It's not mandatory requirement. It's not, the title is not a mandatory, it's a vaccine requirement, and no one's talking term.
But there have been talks about that as a term working. Because otherwise, why are you saying that you're going to lose employees and staffing? If you're losing employees and staffing over this policy, and how many people today said that, that to me means they're not going to be here with this. So I don't want to get into a legal battle over this. I don't want to have to go and have to justify this, but people have statutory rights on termination. So we have to be perfectly clear. What are we saying? What are we asking? And I don't just want to have a headline, because that is not going to be productive for anyone, and it's not going to get us where we need to be. So that's for my vaccination stuff. I will send you that information on 244. Then I would like to talk about the transportation. Transportation was based on your policy and some of what I'm saying, I think that has been addressed today. Letters G and H and operations, transportation of students. How are we going to manage this? I think that you need to push back. I do believe that there are ways for you to push back. I know that it is a weak contract, but I think that there are ways that you can push back. And we have realized that there are things in that contract that says that they must continue to provide these extra routes. They are referred to throughout that policy. I will give every one of you a copy of what we felt like within the contract were your ways that you must be protecting students. But there is a side issue besides just now the transportation. There are mile-long lines of families carpooling and dropping off, picking up, without any crossing guards, without any crosswalks, without lights. People are coming up over that exitway of Walnut Hills and other schools and just crossing into traffic. It's not if kids are going to get hurt, it's a matter of when kids are going to get hurt. And it's dangerous. There are parents driving. There's not enough parking at any high school for all of these kids to start driving to school if transportation is limited. It's too much to ask for parents for their carpooling. That's ridiculous that people are spending 90 minutes to an hour and a half a day transporting their kids to and from school. How long will it be before these families say enough is enough and they just leave and move to the suburbs? This is not happening at any suburban district. None. And so we have to do what we can to protect our students, but kids should not, and families should not be fighting internally and having conflicts just to get their kids to school. Getting kids to school should be the easiest process for kids to get to school. For the full board policy about professional staff and communication codes, there are certain things, you all are elected officials, and as elected officials, you must, as an elected official, listen to the voters. And I understand there are differences. Teachers should not be calling you to say, my principal looked at me crooked, but they should be able to come and publicly speak with their First Amendment rights on anything that is a topic of public concern, which the pandemic has been, transportation has been, and these other issues. We have encouraged teachers to stay in the CPS district and send their children to the school. But what about those employees who are also parents? And now, as employees wanting to speak up as a parent, they're in fear of retaliation now for trying to speak up. They are taxpayers in this system, they are parents in this system, and they should have the rights as a parent. If you go to other districts, the community members, including people who have, anybody who has their kids, they're allowed to speak up. They speak up on a regular basis. And so we believe that you should be listening to the employees of this district, because CFT believes that information that you always receive is sometimes just a dog and pony show, and it's either inaccurate, it's scrubbed information, or it's just unawareness of situations that are happening that need to come to your attention. There are things in policy that are not being followed on a regular basis. There are things in our contract that you all have signed off on that are being totally ignored. And until we all get on the right page of trying to uncover what are the issues, we're never going to solve the problem. And so then this, the administration, this is, I have too many papers. The district org charts, we don't know who to even call anymore. There has to be an org chart. How do you run an organization without knowing what the organization is? And then 3, I want to know how are principals and what are the principals given so that they can enforce the mandatory mask? Because I'm constantly getting reports that the mandatory mask policy is not being enforced, including by parents coming into the building, visitors coming into the building. I'm sorry, the parents and visitors must also wear them. And principals are afraid to address the issue, I think, because they don't think that the district gets their back on it. Every day I'm hearing some school where there are people walking without masks. What are we going to do to be able to policy? It's great to have policies, but if there is not an enforcement, it's really not worth the paper it's written on. And then for the creating positions, it was code 3311. When you talked about the board reserves the right to create new positions and all of these different guidelines, it says some of these things, there are some civil service regulations that make a violation with this language, because right now there is an issue about civil service and testing and how they're supposed to create the list for the workers. And so we need to make sure that the district is not trying to just minimize what civil service laws and regulations are. We are a public entity. It isn't an option. And we cannot have policies that override that. And then just my transportation is who's going to be responsible for students between stops, and then the distance from school to the stop is way too long. So there are some people who have a mile to get to their stop, crossing intersections that are marked on the metric code as with a caution sign. This is a dangerous area for pedestrians. Some of it doesn't even have sidewalks. And so how are we going to address some of those issues?
Appreciate it, President Sellers. That was a lot, and you did, I thought you did a great job doing it. There's a lot to follow. There's a lot. You did. No, I thought it was wonderful. And to your point, I feel, with Ben's homework, I look at the policies. I think it's a very germane topic there. Are we following them? And then with Metro, I know at least most of the board or some of the board is committed to getting our routes back. And then appreciate the feedback on the vaccinations as well. So we're going to close the meeting here, and the media folks who are here, I know. Stick around. We'll just kind of stay right here so you can ask, both of us questions if you would like. So instead of getting up and running all over the place, make it easy, and feel free to come up closer if you want. But we will be closing the meeting here. Thank you for this memo, Ms. Sellers. And one final chance, Mr. Lindy or Ms. Bolton, before we close.
I would only say on the resolution regarding transportation, the board unanimously passed a resolution in opposition to the plan. And so the official stand for the Metro plan has been that we are opposed to it. What our administration has tried to do is protect our children during these first several days of this bad plan. And that has looked like somehow there's an endorsement of this plan. There is not an endorsement either by the administration or the board of this horrible plan. Indeed, we are trying to just protect our kids and our staff and their families. And we are pushing back, but we need the community to help, and we need other elected officials, council and commission, to push back on the sort of board that could change this virtually overnight if they would take a stand in support of our kids.
Mr. Lindy? All right. Without any further business, meeting is adjourned. And again, media folks.